And now it's time to get on to our featured topic, which is one of our favorite episodes that we record from time to time, and that is viewer comments. We like to do those at the end of every season, and about a week and a half ago or so, we hit the summer solstice. So it is time for us to look back at all the questions and comments that those of you in our audience put throughout our spring episodes. So if we focus on our segment replay video, Why Do Birds Sing at Dawn, which had been a question of the week in one of this spring's episodes, we got a comment from a friend of ours on YouTube who visits our channel from Australia. And what that person had to say was, here in Australia, our magpies, not corvids, often sing through the night during full moons, even in rural areas. At dawn, they lead the chorus and use that time to practice their mimicry. Ours can mimic black cockatoos, whistling kites, even horses. I love learning about North American birds from your videos, especially all the, what is that word?
Galliforms.
Thank you. Since we don't have many of those here. Well, I have to say to our friend in Australia, we love your comments in the comments section of our videos, because you in turn are teaching us an awful lot about Australian birds and interesting topics for us to research. But Dustin, when you read this comment from our friend over in Australia, what jumps out at you?
I loved this question because it made me do a double take. Because I for sure thought all magpies were corvids, but I was happy and intrigued to learn that they're not. And as for galliforms, yeah, I didn't realize that those weren't more common in other parts of the world, but Australia is a weird and wild place, so I guess it kind of makes sense. Those are our kind of like ground foraging birds, chickens, turkeys, pheasants, things like that. But Australian magpies, man, that's a fascinating species. Totally a different lineage than the magpies that we have here in North America. Singing through the night, especially under full moon, shows how that behavior can vary across species depending on ecology and evolution, and their mimicry sure is impressive. I've heard their vocalizations are incredibly complex, some rivaling even the lyre birds, which are wild.
So, okay, that's interesting. So can you tell us, like, for the North American magpies, like, is there equivalent behaviors to, like, what you researched when you looked up the Australian ones?
Yeah, it's a little similar. We don't really see birds in North America singing through the night the same way, other than, like, the northern mockingbird. But the rest of the magpie behaviors are pretty similar to the magpies that we have primarily out west, like Colorado, California, stuff like that. But as for our nighttime singers, male mockingbirds, especially ones without a mate, they're notorious for singing all night, especially under streetlights or full moons. And I know you're usually asleep, but I often wake up around 4:15 in the morning, and they're among the very first birds that I hear at that time. They are definitely the most famous mimics, but there's some other notable ones in North America: brown thrashers, gray catbirds, things like that. They often imitate other birds, even mechanical noises sometimes, but it's not always tied to the dawn chorus the same way that magpie behavior seems to be. As for our galliforms, I love that they noticed that family. North America does have quite a variety: turkeys, northern bobwhite, mountain quail, pheasants, ruffs, all kinds of stuff. But it's a great reminder that some bird families are more diverse here than in other parts of the world. And I'm sure the opposite is true of other bird families as well, especially countries or places that are islands like Australia. And that is, man, a biological cornucopia of interesting species.
Yeah, I do have to say that, like, I'm not necessarily a fan of very, very long distance travel. But the more our friends from Australia post in the comments of our channel, the more I'm like, all right, do we have to think about someday going to Australia? Because I feel like there's things we could see there that we're not going to see anywhere else.
Yeah, maybe we have to do, like, a house swap for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So the next comment that we received, which was from the same episode on Dawn Chorus, This viewer had to say, I heard my very first ruby-crowned kinglet of the season this morning, and it stopped me in my tracks. However, my favorite songbird is the red-breasted nuthatch. It sounds more like a tiny honk or a truck backing up. So, Dustin, this feels like your kind of level of audio geeking out on birds. The two birds that were mentioned by this viewer, is there anything that makes them distinct?
Well, ruby-crowned kinglets are very like high-pitched and kind of distinctive for the notes that they hit, although their song to me is not very elaborate, but it is distinctive. Red-breasted nuthatch, however, is quite apropos. In that trip to Cerdamont Springs, I found I found a red-breasted nuthatch nest cavity, and it kept returning, but I wasn't able to capture it on film. But they're actually interesting to note because they kind of sound like our regular white-breasted nuthatches, which are more common here, but much more nasally and, like they say, kind of a truck backing up, like a.
I love your impressions, but could we play?
Yeah, we can play the real ones.
A real one?
Here is the ruby-crowned kinglet.
That is a really pretty call. All right.
Yeah, and I often hear them more like this, kind of a contact call.
Oh, it's so different than the other one.
Yeah.
It amazes me that birders have to understand not just like the song of the bird, but all the other vocalizations. Because you could just hear that chittering noise and not hear the other one that you played. So that's a lot of information to memorize.
Right. And then this is what I heard around the red-breasted nuthatch nest.
So to our viewer, I can understand why you said it sounds like a truck backing up because, yeah, it's very similar in sound. Okay. So what about from a regional perspective? I'm not entirely sure where that viewer who commented on these birds is located in, but where can you see these birds in the U.S.?
Yeah, so they're both kind of more northern Canada boreal forest breeders, but they do come down in the wintertime. And they're both kind of nomadic a little bit and spread around depending on where the good food source is for nuts, pine cones, stuff like that. So in certain years, particularly the same years where you have like red crossbills and other finches that kind of erupt down into the U.S., both the red-breasted nuthatches and the kinglets could be more present. And I do see kinglets quite a bit in the wintertime.
Very good. Moving on to our segment replay video on when birds shouldn't be here, why birds get lost. So one of the comments that we got from a viewer after watching that video was, yes, I've always wondered about this. I'm from New England, but where I live now on a migration path, every once in a while, I'm like, what the heck was that just flew by me? Or what's that sound? So Dustin, we live in Massachusetts. Could you give me an example of a few birds from this spring that you saw coming up in the forums as birds that don't really belong here, but have actually shown up in Massachusetts this spring?
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes actually is from David Sibley, that when birds show up in a place, it might be rare, but it's not random. They show up in places that are the appropriate habitat for them, and they often return to those same places. Even if they were lost, sometimes that gets carved into their memory, and they return to them. So the first, there's actually a couple that were here this spring in the Massachusetts area. The first one I want to talk about is the black-necked stilt. This is a bird that I've only seen in California, and it's a super elegant, petite bird that's just really fun to watch. It moves almost like no other, but it's a total out-of-towner for us. They're usually found down on the Gulf Coast, the Southeast, or out west, like I mentioned. And one was spotted in Suffolk County in Massachusetts on May 28th. That was the very first county record for that bird ever. There also was one A few weeks earlier than that, in one of our neighboring towns, the town of Groton, Massachusetts, and that one showed up kind of in a swale or wetland retention pond for a relatively new building that had been built. So that one was pretty interesting too. Middlesex County is more coastal than Suffolk County, so they'd been here several to many times before, so not quite as notable, but a very good inland bird for us. So that kind of sighting gets birders excited, and lots of e-birders will come looking for a bird like that when it gets reported. The second one is a white-faced ibis. This one was another one that's a shocker, a western species. These rarely make it to New England. They do look a lot like glossy ibis, which is more common here, and they sometimes will hang out with those other ibises when they find them. But if you can catch the face pattern and that distinctive red eye, then you know you've got something special. So anytime you think you're looking at a group of glossy ibises, you got to pick through each one by one and look for that different face in case you get one that's different. And then lastly is a chuck-will's widow. A lot of people in the Northeast know of a whippoorwill. Well, a chuck-will's widow is in the same family of nightjars, or sometimes called goat suckers, because it used to be believed that they drank the milk from goats.
Great.
Particularly like in Africa and stuff like that, where that behavior is more common. But a chuck-will's widow, I've only heard, interestingly enough, down at Disney World early in the morning, sometimes off in the palm forest, you can hear them going, and they're named after the sound they make. Chuck-will's widow, Chuck-will's widow, like that. Versus the whippoorwill that we might hear in the northeastern forest, although those are sadly continuing to decline. Anyway, they're related, but it has that spooky rolling call. If you hear something weird at night or pre-dawn that doesn't match your usual suspects, that's certainly a good one to check out. And it's the perfect example of a possible, what was that sound moment? And that's what happened to me when we were in Florida that time. And I kind of went through my mental Rolodex and realized, oh, chuck-will's widow makes perfect sense.
Moving on to episode 13. This was our winter wrap up where we went through viewers' comments it was at the start of spring, and we were going through all the winter comments that we received from our audience. So someone wrote in, another great episode. Weather is getting nice and warmer. Back to nature walks and birding. So this comment made me laugh, not because they're wrong, but I wish that had been our spring. So here in eastern Massachusetts, where we live, we've had, up until recently, 14 consecutive weekends of rain. One storm in May dropped 7 inches of rain in some places. And so although trails technically stayed open, we had a lot of very waterlogged trails this spring. So Dustin, that got me wondering, thinking about our weather this spring, how does a lot of rain actually affect birds? Does it make them harder to find, or does it just make for some wet birding if you're out there looking for birds as a birder?
Yeah, that definitely cuts both ways, right? If you're looking for the common birds that are around all the time, they might be hunkered down during the rain, and can be harder to find that way. But as soon as the rain breaks, they come out and start foraging, and that often is a really good opportunity to see birds that, if it rained for a couple days, might be really hungry and getting out, being more active. So it can help that way. It also can make finding shorebirds much, much easier, because a lot of them like really shallow ponds where they can forage for the, aquatic invertebrates and things like that. So once those retention ponds fill up or overflow, it often overflows into areas that are not filled with brush and high cover, so it can make them much easier to see. Particularly at a lot of national wildlife refuges have ponds or salt pans that are managed for their water, but those will end up getting filled up or getting much bigger around the edges. Those are great places. Places like Great Meadows National Wildlife Refuge in Concord, Parker River National Wildlife Refuge in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and a lot of the Audubon sanctuaries that are around have features like that.
Moving on to our segment replay video on record-breaking bird migrations and nature's longest journeys. We got the following comment. Thanks, you two. Great show on the migrations of Arctic terns and godwits and redknots. They are amazing migrators. We just missed the redknots when we were in Florida. Have fun on your birding adventures. So, Dustin, So this is a two-part question for you. Number one, what is a red knot? And number two, if someone really wants to catch a glimpse of them during migration, where should they go and what's their best shot?
Okay, so red knots are kind of like a medium-sized shorebird, but they're a little bit bigger than the regular like plovers and sandpipers and stuff like that. Kind of chunky. They've got a shortish bill, and during the breeding season, a really beautiful rusty red chest and face. So it's easier to see that plumage when they're on their way north in sort of like April, early May. But you definitely can see them on the coast in the fall as well. They're kind of early migrants southward. So like late August, early September is really good. And that pattern is common of a lot of shorebirds. And the red knot is famous for being one of the longest distance migrators in the world, traveling up to 9,000 miles one way, all the way from the Tierra del Fuego up into northern Canada in the Arctic. So they're a really good bird.
That's long.
As I said, Delaware Bay is the prime location during mid to late May if you want to catch them on their way northward in the spring. And it's one of the few reliable large concentrations of migrating shorebirds in North America. Sightings elsewhere, like in Florida, can be much more tricky, especially because there's so much coastal development that their populations have been forced to be a little bit more scattered as they pass through briefly, but they kind of they make hay getting north as fast as they can. So your timing has to be just right if you want to see them there. And then finally, to increase your chances, of course, using our digital tools like eBird to track sightings in real time. You'll find them on coastal mudflats, beaches during low tide, tide pools, those sorts of things. Anywhere that you might see a sanderling or semi-palmated plover, at least sandpipers, those kind of birds will often be hanging out with them, even if it's just one or two red knots, particularly in the fall migration southward. They're kind of not in as large groups.
So for our segment replay video, early spring bird arrivals, what to look for now? A viewer commented, I have to agree that coyote howling can be unsettling, especially when they sound so close. So if you saw the original podcast episode, you may remember that Dustin took me out to look for American woodcocks during their spring courtship display. It was a beautiful, quiet meadow, and it was just, what was it, like dusk? The sun had just set. And then suddenly it wasn't quiet anymore because a whole pack of coyotes started howling just out of sight. So those are coyotes. So Dustin, for anyone who has never experienced this, and I'm not talking about the coyotes, this is a birding show. Why is the American woodcock such a big deal for birders? I have seen so many videos of that bird this spring, all over TikTok, over Instagram. People just love posting this bird all over the place. So why did you drag me out into coyote country looking for one of these birds?
Well, they're crazy charismatic and kind of enigmatic when they're on the ground. They do this like one step back, two steps forward kind of walk that's unlike any other bird. They're like comically long bill that they use to dig for worms in the ground and stuff. But they're also kind of like aloof. They'll be near people. They're kind of embedded into the American psyche. Like people call them timberdoodles from kind of like the olden days was their colloquial nickname. And people used to go hunting for them with pillowcases and just try to like grab them in a pillowcase and get them up when bird hunting like that was sort of a thing. Of course, they're protected now. So that's well, they might actually be a game bird in some places. But now it's really about seeing their crazy, crazy courtship display where they peep, peep, and then fly up in the air and twitter and circle down. It's just inexplicable how weird they are. And people, smile and see them, and they're like clockwork. Here you can start seeing them like March 20th or something, pretty early in the birding season. And if you know of a field or a woodland edge where they tend to frequent, they will be there at 10 minutes after sunset every March 20th or whatever is right for your particular spot. So it's a good one to prime the pump for the upcoming birding season too.
So for our segment replay video, 1 weekend birding challenge, how to maximize spring migration birding into 48 hours. Someone commented, everyone loves spring, but I don't mind grinding for kites in the heat of summer. Okay, so this comment came in and I saw the word kite and I saw the word summer and immediately was confused because in my world, especially in my childhood, a kite was something you flew with your family when you were vacationing on the beach in the summertime. But I'm guessing, considering the topics of our channel, that is not what this audience member was talking about. So, Dustin, do you know what they mean when they say grinding for kites in the summer actually means?
Yeah, kites are a type of raptor. There's a whole family of kites. We don't have a lot of them in the Northeast. We have them now and then and in small numbers. But they're a type of raptor. Some notable species in that family are swallow-tailed kites, Mississippi kites, and white-tailed kites. There's also snail kites that actually eat like little apple snails. And I think all the kites have like a really hooked bill that they use as a specialized tool for eating stuff. And those snail kites can use that to dig the snail out of the big, chunky apple snails. So they're really great flyers. They're beautiful birds. They make fun for watching, make for great photography. And they have that same kind of like fast swooping flight style like our tree swallows and barn swallows do, especially for raptors. So yeah, they're just a distinctive bird that's fun. I can see why this person would happily bear the heat of summer to grind for kites, so to speak.
What does that mean, grinding for kites?
It means working hard. It means putting in the work.
So basically hanging out in the field or wherever, just waiting for that opportunity to see one of these birds.
That's right. Spending that sweat equity to achieve that payoff, which is a real good look.
Okay, so our segment replay video, a bird weather puck tracks northeast spring migration. So the viewer comment we got on this was, I'm considering picking one of these up and or setting up a bird net pie. Do you see any advantages or disadvantages to either system? The one that pops out the most to me is cost. So I actually bought Dustin a bird weather puck as an early Father's Day gift this year, mostly because I came across it accidentally online. I liked that it was developed in partnership with Cornell Ornithology, and it has strong links to citizen science efforts. So I thought it seemed like something he'd love to try out during our spring migration season this year. I didn't personally do a big comparison or weigh other options when I made this purchase, which was a gift. This is not sponsored content. So when this viewer mentioned something called Birdnet Pie in the comments, it was the first time I'd ever heard of it. Now, Dustin, you've been using the puck in our yard for about a month now? So maybe you could speak to what that's been like. And could you give also an overview of what we've learned in researching this comment from this viewer on the BirdNet Pie and how it compares, at least on paper, to what we're using?
Yeah, Pi is a small open source computer system or operating system for a small computer. Small like the size of a deck of cards that is meant for a singular specific purpose. Like once upon a time we had a DAC board that we bought for the house that had our calendar and stuff, and it ran just a small set of programs. That was run on Pi, and the different versions or variations of Pi have taken on fruity names to sound like the dessert. So Raspberry Pi is a contemporary version of that that's out there right now. And you can use it for whatever specific purpose that you want. So certainly if you wanted a lower cost option and you're like technically savvy and like to build electronic stuff, I don't know for sure, but I really suspect that a Raspberry Pi based BirdNet software installed version of that you built your own probably be really rewarding to build on your own, a fun little side project, side quest, if you will. but it's probably not for everybody because we don't all have those sort of technical skills or desire to build our own kind of thing. But the puck is really just software that runs in a little device that's pre-manufactured for you. So if that's outside your price range, maybe Raspberry Pi is a better way to, or BirdNet Pi is a better way to go about it. You can probably do it for $100 or $200, which is maybe, $50 to $100 less than a puck might be.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of the bird weather puck now that you've managed to use it for at least a month? It might even be over a month now.
Yeah. I like it way more than I thought I would. I knew I would like it, but I really like it. I check in on it like every day. I'll say its uptime reliability is really great. The only, not really a downside, but the only factor that impacts the uptime for me is battery life. So I basically gave up putting in AA batteries and recharging batteries for it every couple days. And I just use one of our nice big USB battery packs out there. It sits in our gazebo 24 hours a day. It runs for 2 or 3 weeks on one of those battery packs. It's pretty much always up and active. So I check in on it every day just to see what it's been finding. I have a couple of alerts set up. So if it hears an osprey, it tells me there's an osprey being heard. So I can get outside with my camera and try to get some osprey pictures. I also have an alert set up for northern water thrush, which is a bird we could have along the shore of the lake. I've seen it on the lake a few times, but never like as a yard bird. So I'd like to get that as a yard bird. I'm not convinced it's IDing that correctly. And that's my only other comment is I do think sometimes it mis-IDs birds, and understandable, right? This is a far from exact science. But I think sometimes when I go back and I hear the birds that it's been hearing, and if I look at the time sequence, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 birds that it heard overlapping or in close sequence, and it tries to count them as a single recording and will ID that as an incorrect bird that isn't there. But not a big deal. I mean, I'm in tune with what's here. If something like that shows up and it's telling me something crazy is out there, I can listen to it because it has the recording as well. And I can say, oh yeah, that's, not a good enough recording to say for sure, or it only sounds like half of the call or something like that. But it's been really good. I like it.
And so one last question that I'll ask you on this is, we had talked about bringing it up to Acadia National Park when we were up there a few weeks ago, and you hesitated and decided not to do that, even though I thought it would be kind of cool to have it running while we were out hiking around Acadia. But you pointed out that there's some pretty valid challenges we've had with using it remotely.
Yeah, there's a couple things. So if you just take it to another place, even when it's not on your network, to be able to be uploading records in real time, it'll keep listening and record to its little memory card. And then when it's back on network, it'll upload everything. I don't think if it does that, it knows I shouldn't say that. I don't know if it has the GPS associated with those recordings so that when it uploads after the fact, it recognizes that they were recorded in a different place. I think it does, but I have to do a little research on that. And then secondly, I'd rather have it connected to my phone as a hotspot so that it can continue to upload live and in real time and be recognized. And so the research that I did about that is I have to spend a little time making it connect to my phone instead of the home Wi-Fi, and I didn't want to futz with that before we went on our trip, which is why I didn't bring it. But other people have reported, great success doing that. And I've learned from their user forums that each record, this is confusing, each record is associated with your puck, and that puck is associated with your home location. But each recording is not assumed at your home location. The recording does have its own GPS location recorded with it. So when you look at the map and it shows you the puck, it'll show you the location where it's at now, unless you have that hidden, which is understandable too. But it won't assume that everything it heard was from that location because individual recordings have their own unique geotag on it. Got it.
Okay. So our last viewer comment, Wood Duck Jump Day. Babies have hatched. This was a really exciting segment video we put out when our wood duck mama ended up with how many babies?
14.
14 babies. So one of the comments we got on that video was, that's a great camera setup you have there and really good footage captured. So Dustin's the one who sets everything up for our Nestbox cameras and hides out on jump day to get all those clips that we shared with you. So I figured this was the perfect time for you, Dustin, to talk about the specific camera that you're using in the Nestbox and why you're using it. And maybe just a couple comments on what it's like to try to photograph a jump day for Woodbox, just to kind of, I don't know, make sure our audience knows like really what's involved in getting something like that, because it's not easy, right?
Yeah. One thing about me is I love a long game and I'm not afraid of it. It's not the case for a lot of people. I recognize that. But it's a long game in that you have to put up the nest box. You have to be willing to wait it out because it might not get used initially or every year. You have to maintain it, make sure that it's clean, make sure that it's not inhabited by squirrels at the wrong time of year, those sorts of things, so that when the wood ducks come looking for it, as soon as the ice goes away, they have to be clear, because their breeding instinct is strong as soon as the ice is gone and there's open water. And then I use Amazon Blink cameras inside the nest boxes near the house, because I wanted a good small nest camera that runs on battery or solar and is Wi-Fi connected. Amazon Blink cameras check all those boxes. The first generation or two of those cameras required no subscription either. And you still don't have to have a subscription, but they hide so many useful features, you essentially have to subscribe now. So I did upgrade my network with a couple of newer Amazon Blink cameras, and they are a little bit better in terms of picture quality, especially the night vision, like black and white, is really, really good. They're a little bit chunkier than the last version, and as a downside, in order to get like real-time alerts and stuff like that, I think is one of the features that you have to have a subscription for. It's only a couple dollars a month, and you can toggle it on or off if you wanted to do it just during the nesting season. For our purposes, it's well worth it, but I understand why some people really don't want a subscription-based service for that. And then, so that gets us footage from inside the box, which is handy on a couple of levels. It ensures we know when a wood duck is checking out the box, that it wasn't just empty 24 hours a day. It helps me see the schedule that they have. So we did a whole segment about the timing of the hens' visits, breaks and visits, and all that, which was really fun to map out this year. But you also have to, if you want external pictures, you have to pay attention to when jump day is coming. Be ready to look on the camera every day at the right time, or the saved clips. That's where the subscription becomes important. And set up a blind where the hen either can't see you or doesn't know you're in there and is used to that. If you just set up the blind like on hatch day, so she's seeing it for the first time, it's a little bit stressful. So I usually try to set up the blind like at least a week or so in advance, so she just gets accustomed to it being there for several days. And we've had really good luck with that. I did not get external photo from a blind this year because our best box right by the house was not used. Although at the end of the nesting season, one hen kept coming back every day and checking out for a few minutes and leaving. So maybe she's scoping out for next year. I don't know. But also on jump day, the box that they were using did not have any good unobtrusive observation points. I tried setting up a ladder in some places, it just wasn't going to work. And then it was a pretty rainy, kind of crappy weather day on jump day anyhow. Not bad for the ducks, just bad for me. So we didn't get any external footage this year, but there's always next year because, like I said, I love a good long game.